Welcome to Advanced Metasploit. In this section, we're going to be looking at some of the more advanced techniques that can be used with Metasploit, mostly for evasion of being detected. At this point, you have learned how to install Metasploit, how to access modules, how to run different exploits, how to compromise remote server hosts, and how to compromise local machines, how to create standalone files, and how to Trojanize different services. Now what we're going to be looking at is how to try to remain undetected beyond the scope of just changing individual exploit routines. So let's get started. The first one we're going to talk about is evasion with MSFvenom. Now we've talked about MSFvenom before when we were creating standalone Trojans. However, antivirus is always advancing and in many times can detect the standard generated payload that MSFvenom can generate. Doesn't mean it always will, but it means it can in many cases. So MSFvenom introduced something or a concept called iterations, in which it attempts to encode the payload and make it more undetectable. Now, while this method is not foolproof, it can help make the payload a little bit more undetectable to some antivirus programs. Not all of them, but at least it increases your odds of not being detected. So let's take a look at what that looks like when we go to generate payloads using iterations. Now, coming to our console, we're going to see how we can use MSFvenom with iterations to create an obfuscated or harder to detect payload. But a couple things to note about that is going to be first is how do you test it? Well, you'd want to install some kind of antivirus software or some other utility to test it. In this case, on my particular machine, I've installed ClamAV, which is an open source free antivirus scanner software that has a command line functions that I can use against whatever payloads and things that I generate. You could choose to use whatever you want in order to test that. Also, some analysts will try to upload their payloads that they've generated to VirusTotal. I don't necessarily recommend that because once you upload something to VirusTotal, it becomes public consumable then, and you can't get that payload back, so you have it there forever. At this point, we're going to go through the process by which we would create a regular payload before we go through the iterators. So to start out, instead of running our MSF console, we're going to run MSFvenom first, and then we're going to go ahead and set up our pieces. So it's going to be -- platform, and because we're going to be focused primarily on Windows, we're going to type in Windows. And then we're going to set our payload. And in this case, it's going to be a reverse TCP shell. So we're going to go Windows /interpreter /reverse_TCP. So this is going to be the actual shell that we're going to want to create. Then we have to set where we want it to talk to. So it's going to be lhost. And we're going to set an IP address. Next, we're going to set an L port. And then we're going to set an actual payload. Then we're going to say that it's going to be an executable. And then we're going to give it an output file name, which in this case, I'm going to call it, just in this case, or MSFvenom _out. And then go ahead and enter on this. It'll take a few seconds for MSFvenom to come up and actually create our payload. So we'll wait for that. Okay, it's created our payload. So we can see there the file name MSFvenom _out. Now, like I've said before, we do any iterations in this case. All we did was generate a payload like we had previously done before. So what I would do would be use a clam scan, which is an AV scanner that, like I said, has a command line function, and scan MSFvenom _out. If I get lucky, ClamScan will not recognize the payload as a malicious payload and just tell me that it's okay. So we'll see here in just a second after it completes its process of scanning the file. Okay, in this case, this is a pretty common payload that's been used, so it recognizes that as a Trojanized payload. Now what we want to do is we want to try to take the same file and run it again, except this time we're going to put in our iterators, and hopefully it will help us actually obfuscate the file enough for ClamScan to not recognize it. So the extra piece that we added was a -I, which is for iterator, and the number of iterations that we want the encoders to go through. In this case, we're just going to use 10, real quick. So we perform the operation again and let it generate our MSFvenom _out file again. And now what you see is you saw some more information come through, including the iterations that it went through, and now it's saved a new MSFvenom out. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to run ClamScan against that and see if it can still detect it. And we can still see that it's still detecting that file. So we're still not successful with the iterators. It's not a foolproof process by which to be able to create these, but it is something that will help you to obfuscate what you're trying to, your payload that you're trying to do. So let's try it again, except this time instead of doing just 10, let's try it with 1,000 iterations and see if that produces any different results. So let's run a ClamScan against this one, and it'll take a few seconds for that to come through. And you can see it's still detected. So what that tells us is one of two things. It's either the encoder, the Shataka _GA_NAI, which is an excellent encoder, is either been detected enough times that antivirus is picking it up automatically, or the repeating of the algorithm pattern over 1,000 times or within a sequence almost produces the same result. So the next thing that we might want to attempt is just to change the encoder and see if that actually helps us out. So let's see what that would look like. So we go back to the file, and for the -E, we're going to change the encoder from the x86 to, let's try a different one, such as cmd/PowerShell _base 64. Now, if you want to find out what encoders MSFvenom has, you just type in MSFvenom -L or -L encoders, and it'll give you a list of encoders that you can use and how successful they generally are. So let's try the same thing, except in this case we're going to change it to a different encoder, and let's just do 100 iterations. Okay, completed it. So now let's try to see if we can run, we'll list it out, and let's run our ClamScan against it again and see if we are any more successful using this encoder versus the original encoder that we tried. It still found it. So at this point, we would have to do is start looking at other encoders until we found the one that would successfully get us past ClamScan, which is a generic scanner, to try to see if we can get past it. There are several encoders that are contained within MSFvenom. You would just have to find the right one to get you past that, get it deployed to your endpoint, and then get it executed on that one, and you would have successfully exploited that machine by using iterations to get past the initial obfuscation. And now you've at least seen how to use MSFvenom to change out encoders to create payloads, as well as use iterators to try to get through and modify what the payload is.